So welcome to the podcast, Jan Willem. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much, Rob. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well. I'm excited to get stuck into a good conversation. So for those who haven't come across you before and your work with Ajax and the athletic skills model, give us a bit of background in terms of yourself. What was your kind of own sporting journey look like as a youngster, and how did that develop into this love of what you do today?
Well, thank you for having me at first and recording this podcast together. Actually, it's my first podcast recording. I do this from the Netherlands, and you're over in the UK, right? So we can do this together. My journey, well, actually, it started when I was a youngster and playing tennis. I played a lot of tennis, 10, 15 hours a week when I was 12 to 14. Had to go to school, high school. Had to move to another high school because I practiced tennis as much, and I couldn't complete my courses in my regular high school. So I moved over to a special sports school. Finished my high school there, but practiced 20, 25 hours a week next to completing high school. And actually, it just burned me out. And this is probably the starting point of all of my research. What is a healthy way of developing youth athletes, elite youth athletes, probably? So my starting point actually started with own experiences. Moving on to the Marines back then. I was early 20s. I was an officer in the Royal Marines, the Netherlands, of course. We practiced with the Royal Marines in the UK as well, but so after a year or two, I quit the Royal Marines with a knee injury, and it was highly specialized training as well. So specializing early, highly specialized training, leading to dropout, burnout probably, physique, malheur. It just all brought me to this field of what is healthy training and healthy development for athletes. Switched over to elite sports, finished my bachelor's in physical education and a master's in human movement sciences, talent development, and exercise physiology. And I started working with the Youth Academy of Ajax. And in the Youth Academy of Ajax, I constructed the developmental program, multi-sport program. It's called the Athletic Skills Model. And we published 2 books, 2012, the Dutch version, and 2018, the English version, in which we point out how we implemented multi-sports program within the Youth Academy of Ajax. And I was responsible for the implementation and the concept design, also for the growth spurt. So how to bio-band. This is what Sean Cumming, I think you recorded a session with Sean Cumming, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Professor in Bath University, and he actually calls it the 1.0 version of his biobanding concept. It's what I did in the Youth Academy. I switched over from Ajax to being lead performance specialist of FC Twente, Premier League club in the Netherlands, and then I quit elite football actually and moved over to university work. Having the father life of 2 nice little boys and a wife. So living a happy family now and not being a cowboy in elite sports anymore.
That's a good way of describing it.
So that was a quick route.
Yeah, great. They're a real rich kind of, very succinct, but there's a lot going on there in terms of, you can see why your interest in injury and holistic development became part of your thought process with those, that initial tennis experience, then obviously also the Marines. As you said, It's kind of easy to draw that conclusion of highly specialized training and injury and dropout.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that journey of researching that and your time at Ajax and how you kind of developed that athletic skills model further.
Well, it is, very powerful experience if you encounter it yourself, and with a massive knee injury and a burnout in tennis. And, actually, I've touched my racket in 20 years, I think 10 times. So I was completely fed up with it. And, well, I wanted to, I was thinking, how can we help young children or athletes not having the same negative experience in sports, to let them encounter or see that sports can be fun even when you quit elite sports and continue on living a healthy life, being a lifelong active. And then you read into the literature, and there are a lot of models. Jean Coté published a nice model, developmental sports participation. The hourglass model. There are a lot of nice models just telling you that sampling sports is really beneficial for eventually being a long life active. And the question rises then, how to actually implement that. So we sample sports. So we tell parents you have to sample 3 sports or 4 sports. So is sampling 4 sports enough then? And from my point of view, if you practice 4 sports, 4 hitting sports, let's say squash, tennis, table tennis, and padel, or even baseball, they're probably similar sports, right? So you sample sports, but do they benefit you, or do they bring you the benefits of sampling? And so all these questions together made me think of, well, maybe we should turn it around and look from the athlete standpoint. How do we develop the all-round athlete within a specific context? So a young child chooses tennis or he chooses football. And from my experience, I worked in the youth academy of Ajax. They play football, they practice 3 times a week, and then they play a match in the weekends. How do we add different sports to that? So rather than adding sports, we added alternative exercises to the specific profile of football. And this is basically what my PhD is about in Ghent University in Belgium, with Professor Lenoir and Professor Pion. We establish unique sport profiles, and out of these profiles we search for similarities and differences between sports in order to either transfer, if you take a look at the similarities between sports, but also for developmental pathways, if you would look at from the standpoint of the differences between sports. So sports differ, and where they differ, you can search for complementary items between those sports. So for this all-round development of young athletes. So basically reading into my own experiences or negative experiences within the Marines and elite tennis led to construct developmental pathways for young athletes. Yeah, basically.
So one of the things you mentioned there, which is often, I guess, the barriers that people run into is how do we actually apply a model in real life? Now, obviously, you managed to do that during your time at Ajax and beyond. So what was that like when you first started bringing those ideas of actually, how can we integrate these other activities? Was there resistance from the coaches who were, trying to push the idea of football more, or were they quite open to that idea? How did that work?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, of course, there is a lot of resistance. It's not football only. So now you have to, actually discuss the model of development, talent development model with them. And what is a healthy development, and how do you bring your elite athletes forward, and showing them examples, powerful examples of other sports, probably like Roger Federer, practicing other sports than tennis. LeBron James being elite football player before turning over in probably one of the best basketball players ever. So you show them powerful examples of other sports, and then having them or discuss that with them. So what can be the benefit of practicing other sports? And well, if you reason from your own context, then you're stuck in your own world, in your own culture. And if you can reason from other contexts and you see the benefits, let's say tennis or basketball in this regard, then you step out of your own context and you can reflect on that. And that was probably the best step to do that with the coaches, is to show them powerful examples, and then really low profile other exercises, core stability exercises, but then as a crab football on the mat. And then from crab football, bring it onward to sliding and stability exercises on a gym floor, a really slippery gym floor. And then all of a sudden, this gym floor brings you to gymnastics. And then you really reel them into the world and the concept of multi-sports and developmental pathways. And you have to discuss this with the parents as well. We biannually invited the parents, and we discussed the programs and the steps, the selection processes, and the test results with them as well. So yes, it was a tough route. It took us quite a while to convince coaches. They're transferring, coaches transfer as well. They move, and so you have to start over again and again. So it was a interesting route, yes, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the struggles, isn't it? Is I think a lot of people pay lip service to the idea of actually, yeah, we want to sample different sports, and it'd be great if every athlete could do all these other skills as well. But then often when things get real, coaches are like, well, actually, we've only got X amount of training time, and I want to focus that on football or on tennis. And so it can become really difficult. That while in theory it's a nice idea to practice all these things, once time becomes restricted, it then becomes actually no, we're going to focus on that one specialist sport again. Is that something you ran into?
Yes, we took away. That's how they felt it. We took away 50% of their training time, but they didn't have to bother by the ideas of strength training, core stability, and so we did that for them. So they could pay attention to the technical work, and so it left them with 50% of the time doing the technical stuff, and this is what they really, really like to do. And so we emphasize that, the 6 to 12-year-old guys, load them with technical work, technical stuff, as complex as possible. And do not bother the physical work. We'll do the physical work for you. And the physical work was the motoric work. We implemented, it was all motor learning, body control. And so we took that away in our gymnastics hall. And once in a while they paid a visit to our gymnastics hall, and then they saw us doing all the sliding and the gymnastic exercises, and then all of a sudden they questioned what we're doing, but they saw the benefits, and they saw that the athletes become more resilient and more or stronger, and had a higher body awareness. So in the end, at first they were really reluctant in sharing training time with us, but at the end they bought it.
I think that's the key one that you mentioned there, is around those examples. And I think you did a good job of that in the book when you mentioned people like Budavine Zenden and judo and Ibrahimovic and taekwondo. And one of the things you touch on there is the idea of affordances and being able to do slightly different things. So for those who haven't come across the term affordances before, give us a bit of an overview of what you mean by that.
Well, it's really interesting that if you do not master a certain skill, you do not see the option of actually applying it into practice. And if I can't, I have this really nice example of an American football player making a front flip over a defender and scoring a touchdown. If you're not able to do the front flip, you won't see the opportunity of jumping over or leaping over a defender. Zlatan Ibrahimovic has a background in Taekwondo. His flexibility and his spatial orientation provides him an advantage over other football players in order to score. So if you analyze his goals, you see that his Taekwondo has influenced him as a football player. If he hadn't practiced or developed these skills, he was not able to score these goals. So it helped him forward. And from my point of view, these are the affordances. If you provide young athletes with a broad all-round development and you provide these skills with them, you help them forward in being creative in finding solutions to movement problems, basically.
Mm. I think for some people that at first sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? That we get better at one sport by practicing other sports. But as you said, if you don't have that as a movement option in your brain, then when that opportunity presents itself, that's not even on the menu, is it? It's like that's not something that we could ever imagine, because you don't have the previous experience of that or the context to do that skill successfully. So your brain doesn't even pull that up as an option for that situation in time.
You do not have the experience. It's not that you're dumb. No, you do not have the experience yet. And providing the skills or to see the options makes athlete more creative in finding solutions to complex problems on the field or off the field as well. So, you know, it actually takes you longer to become a highly specialized athlete when you're an all-round athlete. But in the end, it benefits you more in finding creative solutions, being more resilient to injuries, less burnouts, etc. So yes, it works counterintuitive, and that's why we always have to keep pushing the coaches and telling them not to really step back and increase specific training time, but try to increase your general training time, general specific athletic work to them as well.
So what did that look like in day-to-day sessions? Was that just like a component of the warm-up, or was that a whole separate session, or how did you integrate that?
At the Academy of Ajax, it was a complete separate session of 45 minutes. Actually, they came 20 minutes early to my practice because they really like doing the work. You know, it's deliberate play. It is our structured play, as you would. We organized these activities and sessions. It was really playful, and they liked it. We practiced with the first team different activities as well, and they, you know, the same exercises basically as for the young athletes. We practiced that with the elite athletes, and they really liked it. So to increase your training time, not having to worry of the load, is by implementing fun exercises.
That's really interesting, because, you know, there's a lot of research out there around monotony and staleness and those kind of things with injury. And as you said, providing a different stimulus or something that's maybe mentally stimulating in a different way or more enjoyable or just moving differently can kind of help, you know, avoid that monotony or that staleness, can't it?
True. So we always try to search for higher order training themes. So the discussion of what is specific or what is generic in athletic training is it's a hard discussion. So if you reason from what is specific, is core stability specific for football, or is the generic supporting construct you need in order to score a goal? Or so the generic work we did was highly valued in the end by our specific coaches, football coaches. And I think this was how we could lay the fundament for the specific work they asked the athletes on the pitch. And they saw that it really paid off. One of the athletes, Matthijs de Ligt, currently with Juventus, or Donny van de Beek in Manchester United, two examples of athletes coming through our model in the youth academy. I actually worked with Matthijs. He was a early developer. I have videos of him, you know, being this really strong and tall guy, it was mentally younger than his body, basically. So we really had to slow him down in the physical work, or move him up with the big guys, but mentally we had to address him differently. You know, just lay the generic foundation for these athletes to succeed in later life, and not trying to have success in the age of 12 or 13 or 14. It eventually has to pay off in the end.
So give us a bit more. You've kind of discussed a little bit around the ideas of similarities and differences across sports and creating a profile. And obviously you sent me that recent article looking at kayaking and canoeing and the crossover. So for those who maybe haven't come across the idea of a unique sports profile, give us a few examples of how there might be similarities and differences in different components.
Article was published in Journal of Science and Medicine in Sports. And it is, well, actually, we searched for the similarities and differences based on the idea that a coach is able to see and provide us with what tasks are determined or important in your sport. So it's a task analysis basically on generic characteristics. And we searched between 19 sports for the similarities and differences. Of course, there's a lot of statistics in the article, but won't touch on that. So what we found is, and we case studied canoeing or canoe and kayak sport, because of the federation, the Belgian federation came up to us and asked us, can we enlarge our talent pool by searching for talents in different sports? And with that question in the back of our heads, we applied that the concept of similarities and differences to the canoe and kayak sport. And so at first we established unique profiles, each sport based on the idea of the coach of what is important in their sports for performance, which tasks are important. And basically the jumping, the kicking, hitting, etc. All those fundamental skills were addressed. And based on that, we created profiles, unique profiles for badminton, for football, for tennis, etc. And what we found is that there are many sports with overlap, but also many sports with differences between the sports. And the overlap, the similarities between those profiles suggest that you can enlarge your talent pool. And so if you search for the similarities and differences between sports based on these unique profiles of sports, you can enlarge a talent pool for a specific sport, especially if you take a look at the similarities between sport. If hitting is similar between tennis, table tennis, squash, etc., it's really easy for me as a tennis player now to play badminton and to play table tennis or to play baseball, because I've mastered the skill of hitting in my previous life when I was a tennis player, not having the burnout. But those are similar items within sports, and you can then search specifically for the transfer between those sports. So yeah, identify elements within these sports and then transfer over. But for the differences between sports, you can show coaches that their sport is not that all-round as they probably all think it is. Gymnastics is probably it's an all-round sport, although hitting is not in there as a skill. So you can add hitting to the profile of young gymnastic athletes. But cycling, for example, is not a diverse sport if you take a look at the profile. So if you want to really develop young all-round athletes, then the cycling coaches can learn from gymnastics or from martial arts, from judo. So therefore, we're currently working with a partnership with the Judo Federation here in the Netherlands as a donor sport for other sports. And it's really interesting for them to share their experiences and inspirational videos of training videos with other sports. So the Hockey Federation is really interested in what the Judo Federation is doing. And I provided the generic language of movement that they can communicate now by. So the federations are now communicating by the generic language of movement and can inspire each other, constructing youth pathways.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, again, that's one of those things that people might think, well, you know, if my sport's missing this, why would I bother going looking for another sport? Because the target sport is cycling, for example. But actually, as you've pointed out, it could be detrimental potentially to leave those skills completely off the table, couldn't it?
Yes, it can be. I'm not saying it is. There are many routes, many developmental routes, of course, for young athletes to become an elite athlete or to have being a long life active. But to this more scientific question is how broad should development be? Should we all master a skill at the level of at a 10 level from 0 to 10? Or is 8 enough, or 7 or 6? Or should we really incorporate hitting into gymnastics? Why should we do that? And how much time do we spend on hitting then? These are more scientific questions, and but in practice, we work with an elite gymnastics club here in the Netherlands, basically Olympic athletes, and we apply this model to their training sessions. So we actually incorporated hitting in their training sessions as well, hitting a ball or catching a ball, not only for rhythmic gymnastics, but also for the normal gymnastics, as I may say that.
That leads quite nicely into the overview of the athletic skills model, doesn't it? Because there's the idea of having multiple sports and then donor sports and then sports related and sports specific components, isn't there?
Yep. Sports are related, and sports related activities or sports adaptive, so highly specific exercises or activities within your sport can be done differently on different surfaces, different ball types. So the implicit way of learning. Differential learning theory, basically. But it's a continuum of specific to one end and generic to the other, as I said earlier. And it brings you to the discussion, what is generic and what is specific? And to my end, it's specific only when it's demanded within the game in competition. And if you analyze that, that is your specific training. So the game itself or the match or in competition is most specific as you can be. Then analyze what is happening there and then relate that back to, okay, is it specific for your sport only, or is it generic? And is it generic between 2 or 3 sports or between 5 sports? You need some sort of model between those sports to compare, and that is basically the article. The article is a conceptual piece of how to compare sports between each other.
And you've also done a great job, I think, of giving people examples. Again, it's one of the things where it can be easier to talk about than to apply it, but you've also started to build a bank of videos and a community of people who are demonstrating ways of creating sport adaptive or sport related exercises with your website, Sports Inspirator, haven't you?
Yes. It was always a huge struggle that we constructed these higher order training themes within the youth academy, and you wanted to bring some new exercises to the field. And then you search YouTube, and it's out there, and everything can be found on YouTube. But I couldn't find it within an hour or so, and to really search new exercises or new activities was really a struggle for me day in, day out, and for my colleagues as well. And we shared exercises and activities, but I thought, well, this can be done more efficiently if we all provide our best exercises or inspirational training activities, and we upload them to a training website. And it's open source for everybody. So the sportsinspirator.com is open source. It's for everybody. Based on the generic language of movement. So you can label your exercises based on the generic and specifics of movement and sports. And then you can inspire others. And what you see is that the Judo Federation now uploaded these videos to inspire the Hockey Federation. And the Hockey Federation is uploading videos to inspire football, not only based on the motoric skills, but also on the tacticals. Same pitch size, same number of athletes on the pitch, relative spaces on the pitch, these are similar. So you can learn from other sports and other games by uploading your own activities to the platform and be inspired by by others on the platform as well. So yes, we constructed this with a few experts called the Board of Experts, a physician, experts in the field of talent development and exercise physiology, and we really wanted to push this and help the field forward. Based on
as you've mentioned, that's open source and it's available in English and in Dutch, isn't it?
Yes, it's available in English as in Dutch. Yes, true.
And I'm thinking, I mean, it's, I've flicked through it myself. So people can search by sport, but also by the component, say, for example, hand-eye coordination or things like that, can't they? To get an idea of different activities.
Yes, so based on the generic items of movement or the language of sports and movement, you can then label your activities and search for these generic labels. So if I highly value hitting as a skill within my sport, then you see the videos from tennis, from table tennis, from badminton, but also from handball or baseball. So all different sports, similar activities. And this is the basically the paper of similarities and differences is what you see here. Only then an inspirational side to inspire others.
So what's next in your research? Obviously, you've produced that initial kind of concept around similarities and differences. What are you looking at next, and what's further afield?
Well, we published another article on the accuracy of prediction equations in growth and maturation. That was an article we recently published with Bob Malina and Sean Cumming and one of my great colleagues. And the next paper or next study we're conducting now is the level of diversity of sports. And based on this study, you can see that sports are highly diverse or not. And can we actually say something on how diverse is your sport as a sport? And we want to relate that to early specialization and late specialization. So this is our newest insights, and we're currently transferring our knowledge to practice. In the Netherlands, you have a officer working within the municipalities, and he's responsible for providing youth athletes or children with to really increase their movement time in the sport clubs, but also in the neighborhoods. It's called a sports coach, and we really want to apply our knowledge to a digital platform for the digital sports coach. It's a Dutch concept only, but really transfer the knowledge to the field. And I strongly believe that if we can educate our coaches, we can educate the sports coaches within clubs, but also within the neighborhoods or within municipalities, we can really lift the idea of healthy development for our children.
Absolutely.
And relate that back to my own experience.
No, it's kind of nicely come full circle back into that. How can we prevent, I guess, others experiencing what you experienced in terms of that burnout and injury and negative experience of sport?
Yep, true.
So for those who are interested further, obviously you've got sportsinspirator.com where they can have a look at some of the different activities and ideas, but also if they wanted to dig a bit further into the theory and the application, there's obviously the athletic skills model book, isn't there as well? Where is that available if people want to read that?
Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. It was initially published, the English version by Routledge. You can find it there. You can also search more in depth if I'm sometimes called the philosopher back at work. I like to dig in deep into the philosophy of things. For itruvian.com, for and on Itruvian, as in the man of Vitruvian. For itruvian.com is a website I just pointed out to what philosophy we in sports, but also in for the concept of transfer of learning. So with your experiences in your previous life, my background in my Marines, helps me forward in sports and exercise studies right now. And the concept of the phenomena of experiences, that philosophy is pointed out there.
And I'm assuming also, obviously, your ResearchGate profile is where you're publishing your most up-to-date research. So we can obviously link to that as well.
Profile.
Fantastic. Well, I know you're a busy man, Jan Willem, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but thanks so much. That was a really great discussion around, both the concept of similarities and differences and affordances and blind spots. And I think there's a lot of value in what you're doing and a lot of good questions that people can start asking about their own sport and the way they're organizing training and sampling other things. So thanks so much for your time. I know that's been really helpful.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me. And if there are any questions out there in the field, maybe they can shoot them through the website of Sports Inspirator. Thank you.